Okay, hi everyone. I think that's 5-2, so we'll get started. Welcome to a session on Scrum, Team Foundation Server and Visual Studio 2012. Bit of a mouthful. Quick baseline. Who is currently using Scrum? Wow, that's good. And currently using Visual Studio or Team Foundation Server to manage your Scrum process? So, okay, about 80-90% using Scrum, maybe 30 or 40% using Visual Studio. Let's get the intros out of the way. My name's Rob Mayer. I'm a Microsoft ALM MVP. So that basically means I spend a lot of time going in and helping companies adopt Visual Studio, Team Foundation Server, Scrum, and Agile processes. I'm a trainer with Scrum.org, which was founded by Ken Schwaber, who's one of the two guys that came up with Scrum. And we go into organizations and offer Scrum-specific training, but actually far more common recently is, well, how do I get Scrum and my engineering process working right? And what we're really going to talk about today is how Microsoft view that solution. So how do I blend Scrum, as hopefully is the right way of doing Scrum, alongside the Microsoft tooling stack? So how do we actually fit in the right engineering process with the way we want to track our work and our project or product using Scrum? So my details are on there. Feel free to get in touch if you'd like some help with either of those things. I'm an independent consultant. One other thing I want to call out before we get started is the Agile New Zealand conference. So I'm one of the co-organisers of that. We have a conference in Wellington each year. It's in March next year. We've got some great overseas talent as well as local speakers coming to present on both Agile and ALM. So by ALM, I mean Team Foundation Server, Visual Studio, dev and test practices that work well in an Agile team. So if you're interested, go have a look at agilenz.co.nz. There'll be a bunch of announcements coming up soon. So what are we going to cover? Why Scrum? So we won't labour this, but there's a couple of interesting developments that have happened recently in the States that I think you'll find interesting. Why is Scrum a compelling decision? Now, it looks like most of you have made that decision, but you'll be keen to see this case study, I think. Visual Studio Scrum 2.0, it's a bit of a mouthful. That's the name of the process template that's now inside Team Foundation Server 2012. So going back to Team Foundation Server 2010, the default process template that it shipped with was MSF5, MSF for Agile 5. And who's using that right now, MSF for Agile? Got a few. This was Microsoft's attempt at taking really the family of Agile approaches, Scrum included, Kanban, iterative, short iterative, waterfall, you name it, bundling them all up into one and trying to build a process template that appealed to everybody. And some people liked it and some people didn't. What quickly happened was the Scrum community said, actually, we want a Scrum template. Give us a Scrum template that's supported by the product team. So they reached out to the likes of Scrum.org and other people in the Scrum community to help them say, well, okay, what should be in this Scrum template? This was at a time where Microsoft themselves, this product team, was transitioning to the use of Scrum. And so Microsoft Visual Studio 1.0 was born. And that was released after Team Foundation Server 2010. So it's a free download. And this was the first trial at really lining up true Scrum as well as the Team Foundation Server process template. Visual Studio Scrum 2.0 is the next evolution of that, and it's what ships in 2012. More importantly, it's the new default. So just think about that for a minute. Now, if I go into Team Foundation Server, create a new team project, and hit next, 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 which is what 80% of people do, I just made that up, but a lot of people do, you're going to end up with a Scrum project. So Microsoft are really betting that this idea of small team Agile development is the way forwards. So you're not going to end up with this umbrella MSF for Agile or a CMMI sequential process. You're ending up with a Scrum process. So that's a good indication of where their investment is heading. Right? It's the default process template. So it's going to get a lot of investment. They want the default process template to feel good and be nice to work with. So it's a big direction for them to change that default. So we'll look at our product backlog. And we'll go through a bit of the Scrum process with the new tooling. So how do I, once I have my team project created, how do I set up my team, my sprints, my iterations, all the things that I had, the standard tasks that I had to do in 2010, how do I do them in 2012? Or if you're used to a product like Rally, like version 1, like all the different sort of other agile tools out there, Jira, maybe you're interested in, well, what does Team Foundation Server got to offer in the same space? So we'll look at some of those processes. What is a Scrum board like? How do I interact with it? We'll go through that process. So we'll set up a backlog, go through a bit of a sprint, and hopefully get everything to finished. So why Scrum? This is a recent study by the Standish Group, and they brand it as this Chaos Manifesto. And they looked at projects that were delivered between 2002 and 2010. So it's a pretty big research effort. And they asked the customer, so the person that was paying, to categorize the results of these projects. And they categorized them into successful, challenge, and failed. And you can go and look this up, and you can see the exact descriptions of all these categories, but you get the idea. They then split out into the delivery mechanism, so waterfall versus agile. And you can see there's some pretty big differences. And I don't want to labour statistics. We can make statistics look like anything we like. The point here is that this is an 8-year span. We're seeing lots and lots of projects be more successful using agile than waterfall. So I think the takeaway is that whole agile versus waterfall is like the last decade's debate. Right? Agile's not going anywhere. We're seeing processes like Kanban appear, new modern interpretations on what it means to run an agile team. So it's just growing and evolving. And so the sort of thought, well, these agile guys are going to go away sooner or later, and they'll just stop bothering me and just give me all my requirements up front. People are having continued long-term success with this, and that's not going to change. So I want to talk about this case study. This is fascinating, and it's topical. It's happening right now in the States. Everyone knows the FBI, so it's a great organisation to talk about. They had a system called the Automated Case Support System, ACS. It's basically a big CRM, amongst other things, but at its heart, it's a big CRM. And this is the system that you are in. If you're a row in this database, there's a federal case against you, or it's soon to be against you. So you don't want to be in here. This is how they managed their caseloads. People thought it was obsolete even before it shipped, right? This was built on 70s era technology. So we're talking IBM 3270 green screens, Adabas data storage. This isn't the latest and greatest. And it had some issues, and these issues really exacerbated during the whole 9/11 thing. So they found that FBI agents couldn't securely communicate with things like headshots, right? We want to send some headshots of a suspect to another agent or another agency, and they couldn't do it using this tooling. They literally ended up burning DVDs and getting them couriered. And so they didn't have a secure mechanism to do it. And this was one of the drivers behind, we need to rewrite this. We need a modern solution for today's FBI. So the virtual case file project was initiated. And this was pretty big, right? 380 million, 3 years, pretty significant. They put a big tender out, as they do for large government projects, and it was won by SAIC, Science Applications International Corporation. They won the bid. And they had a bunch of other vendors that they promised to deliver with, but they were the prime. So how did it go? This is Robert Mueller, not sure how to pronounce his name. He's the head of the FBI. So he's the one that has to front to Congress. So in the States, you want money to run a public project, go to Congress, this is what we're going to do. 2001, coding started. He had to keep going back to Congress for more money. It's going okay, just a little bit more money, slight delay, just a little bit more money, it'll be fine. 2005, 170 million in the hole, scrapped it. Not a single thing of value for 170 million US dollars. What do you do? You're Robert Mueller, what do you do? Resign? Blame the terrorists? Yep, that works. So he used an old trick, right? An old IT manager's trick. What we'll do is give it a new name. We'll completely start again, but with a new name this time, right? No one will know. What virtual case file? No, this is something completely different. And so we basically threw away that money, and we started the Sentinel project. Much cooler name. This one's got to work, right? Sentinel project was born. We do another bid process. This is now 2006. Lockheed Martin win the bid. Lockheed Martin are like an enormous defense contractor in the States. They make the fighter planes, like the F-14s, F-16s, whatever it is. One of those big planes, they make it. It's got a bit bigger, 6 years, 450 million. So good to know that technology's moved on and things are getting more expensive. Same scope, right? Replace the old one. So Lockheed Martin, all good. This time, come on, this time, right? 4 years on, we've done 1.5 phases out of the 4 phases of the project. We've spent $421 million of our 450. So we've got 30 mil left. The Government Oversight Committee engaged this MITRE, which is a government research agency, to do this audit and say, well, based on what they've done and how much it's cost and what's left, how long will it take if they carry on at the same rate and burn money at the same rate? And they said, it's going to take another 6 years and cost another $351 million. So that 170 that SAIC got, that's gone, right? It's not even included here. We wrote that off. So imagine you're one of these poor FBI agents. Remember, coding started in 2001. You've been waiting 9 years now, and you still haven't got anything, right? And then we've spent, I don't know, $1 billion. So back to Congress. Still got a job. Still there. It's amazing. Okay, so we do another project reset. Right, we start again. They hired the CIO, ex-CIO of Lehman Brothers, one of the big, Wall Street banks. He brought in Scrum. He got rid of 360 people off the project. So he downsized it. Lockheed Martin, goodbye. So we're down to 40 people. They started a Scrum studio. So in the basement of the Hoover building, literally, 40 people started using Scrum. We'll deliver every 4 weeks, and then I think they dropped down to 2 weeks. In 1 year, they finished it for $30 million. That's the last $30 million of the original budget. So they didn't even have to ask for any more money. Remember, Lockheed Martin spent 420 out of the 450. So for the last 30, they finished it. So this is like an incredible case study for agile delivery. This was Scrum in particular, but whatever your flavor is, it's an incredible case study, a positive story for small team, focused, short iteration engineering. They turned it on, so they were ready. This was last year. Flick the switch. They went live across the entire network for 9 minutes, and then the hardware blew up. The hardware that Lockheed Martin had bought way back when, right? Years and years and years ago. So they had to buy new hardware, which was, they bought it on this, it's like 5 years old or something. So they did a standard hardware refresh. It's now live. It's now in production. I won't bore you with the kit they used to run it on, but what they did do just before they pushed it live was got about 300 FBI agents into various field offices to run trials. So they would run cases and add evidence. So it's a full sort of, FBI case management system. And they polled them for what they thought. Now you can imagine waiting 10 years, I'm probably a bit grumpy by now, but this better be good, right? This better be good. And they got something like 8.5 out of 10 on average was the score back from the user base. So, it's not that they cut a whole bunch of scope out to deliver this. This has been well received by the user base, and literally 40 people, 30 million, 12 months. It's an incredible story. The reason I like this is there's no vendor trying to sell you anything. There's no tools, no one's trying to sell you services. This is a public project. And because it's public, it's fully audited. And so you can go and Google to Project Sentinel, find all this information. Every 6 months, it was audited by the Attorney General in the States as a public project. You can see what they found, what the burn rate was, completely transparent. So a couple of quotes from one of the audits. Obviously, you would hope that cutting the project team from 400 to 40 meant your burn rate went down. And at that time, I think this was the last audit, they were scheduled for 2012. As I say, it's now shipped. And the extension was primarily due to the need because the kit blew up, right? They had to actually buy some kit that worked. So I thought that was worth talking about. You know, it's in the news. Sentinel generated an enormous amount of interest in the States, and it's become this real poster child for using Scrum. So when people ask you for case studies or will prove to me it works, I think that's a really compelling story. So just wanted to sort of do a reset on the version of Scrum you're going to see in the tooling is the version of Scrum that's in here, right? This is the Scrum guide, which is a free download from scrum.org, authored by the two people who invented Scrum. Pretty straightforward. These are the rules. It's about 15 pages, and everything in there is the body of knowledge of what Scrum is. You know, if it's not in there, you may choose to do it and call it Scrum, but these two guys wouldn't. So, well worth a read. And I guess alongside that, while we're talking about Ken Schwaber, I've got 2 copies of his latest book. Actually, both these guys wrote this book, which is aimed at managers. So it's very much about why Scrum works and a whole bunch of case studies. It's a nice, easy read. So that's your encouragement to pay attention for the rest of the session. I'll ask a couple of questions. So Visual Studio 1.0, we've talked about where 2.0 came from. 1.0 got over 100,000 downloads, which is pretty good when you think it wasn't part of the product. So it was a subsequent release, you had to go and get it to install it, and there was over 100,000 people did that. So also worth mentioning the new Team Foundation service, which is an Azure-based instance of TFS that you can use. The default for that also, Visual Studio Scrum 2.0. So Anthony Borton, a ALM MVP from Australia, is doing a session on Team Foundation service. So a whole session on it. So if you're interested in that, make sure you go along and check your session out. And as we mentioned, the template maps directly onto Scrum. So we've got rid of words like iteration that don't mean anything in Scrum and turn them into sprints. We've got rid of user stories, which is just one flavor of requirement, right? That's not the only way I can do requirements in Scrum, and turn them into product backlog items, and so on. So what are the work item types we have now? Product backlog item just talked about. We have a task, which could be a sprint backlog item. Some code review and feedback requests are there to service other features. So if you were in my earlier session today, you'll have seen the functionality around those things, but they really don't mean anything from a Scrum point of view. Impediments, test cases, and sprint is gone. You see that in the red at the bottom. Sprint used to be a way that we attach some metadata, start date, end date, retrospective output. In 2010, that's disappeared, so we use different mechanism to attach that metadata now. And a bunch of queries to interact with those things. And finally, reports. So for those of you that use MSF for Agile 5, you'll think, well, that's not a lot of reports. Right? That process template has about 30 reports easy. Most people don't use even 5 of them. So you haven't missed much. These are the key reports for a Scrum team. A lot of those other reports, again, for MSF, for Agile, really have no place in Scrum. It's not meaningful. So we've got the ones that matter, right? Velocity, builds, testing, the things that we care about, and the standard burn down stuff. So Team Web Access. This is the way we're going to interact with Team Foundation Server for all of our Scrum tracking. Whether you're a Visual Studio user, whether you're a project server user, this is it. Right? So you know today the devs sort of live in Visual Studio. To interact with the Scrum board, this is really where they're going to spend their time. It's complete rewrite. So if you're used to the old version of Team Web Access, it filled a need, but it wasn't really feeling very modern anymore. And so drag and drop support, reordering. There was a great add-in by a company called Urban Turtle that a lot of companies use to fill some of the gaps with 2010. This really now is a fully rounded product. Some of the other big complaints with 2010, the burn down charts. So they were based off the cube in Team Foundation Server, which meant you got an update once an hour, typically. Quite annoying. I want to burn down. I want immediate feedback from, I've added some work or we've completed some work. I want immediate feedback on my burn down. Now I get it. So now it's based off the operational data store. We get some instant results. I can do forecasting for release planning. I'm going to show you that. And there's different licensing modes. So I don't want to talk too much about licensing, but I do just want to call it out. There is a difference between the features you are allowed to see in Team Web Access depending on your license. I'll quickly call that out in one of the demos. So we have our 3 levels, and we'll show what I can do for each one. My limited access is view what I've done. This is free. Standard access is I can see the agile boards and the standard features, and I'll show you those. And this is I have a CAL. Full access is I have a test professional license or a premium license, and then I get these additional features. And you have to manage this. This is really the only reason I'm calling it out, is because the tool doesn't manage this for you. Your company has to manage who's allowed to see these things. So finally, we're doing team-based development, and our tooling has a notion of teams. So that works pretty well. We can attach metadata to teams. We can have a photo, a name, a description. I can belong to multiple teams, and it means I can scale my Scrum effort because I can assign teams to different areas of my product. Right, so thinking about, well, one team of 10 is fine, but I want to run 5 teams. How do they get their backlog items? How do we manage their sprints? We're using this new team capability. We can do that. With teams comes team alerts. So if we are all interested when the build fails, if we're all interested when someone raises an impediment, now we don't have to individually sign up to alerts. We just create a single team alert. Someone else joins our team later on. They're instantly subscribed in the same team alert. So again, the notion of having a team as a first-class notion opens up some more interesting possibilities. If we want an email alert, obviously we need an SMTP server. So things that we're likely going to have to go through: creating our team project, setting up our team, configuring their security, permissions, photos, setting up our sprints and potential areas, and then think, where are we going to put our definition of done? So those of you using this to do Scrum, those are kind of the common activities you're going to have to learn how to do in the new tooling. So I'm going to show you what some of those look like. Flick across here. I've created a blank team project, and this is what the new Team Web Access looks like when you've got nothing in it at all. So by default, it's got the one person in it who created the team project, nothing else. So this is the name of my team project, Scrum TFS 2012. So we can see we've got the home screen we're on right now. It's giving us some sprint details, which are obviously empty, some empty burn down. I can go through to work and look at work items, and this is where I access my queries. Source will take me through to view the source code. Can't check anything in still from this version, but I can go and look at source that's out there. And then builds, I can see running builds, what builds have been defined, and kick some builds off. So it's kind of the high-level navigation that we've got. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is set up my team, which means I'm going to go into the administration side of this interface. So on the top right, you see this funny, I'm not even going to give it a name, this thing. This is the window to load the administration interface. So if I click this, a what?
It's a gear.
A gear, there we go. You work in marketing? No? Just checking. Right. So what that's done is loaded another tab. See, there's my old tab, there's my new tab. And this is my administration view, where I can do all of my admin functions. And by default, it's taken me into this teams area, and you can see I have this team created, but I didn't create a team. So it's going to set one up for you based on the name of your team project out of the box. So because I called my project Scrum TFS 2012, I have this team here. So if your project is just going to be used by one team, then it's done it for you and put the person who created the team project inside this team. Okay, so I can work with this team that's been created. And let's add some more people to it. So if I click into here, I can add a Windows user or group. So one of the easiest ways to work with this, if you're using AD, is create a group, put everyone who's in the team in that group, and then we can just add the group straight into here. Saves us having to add individuals. So I think I created something called Scrum team. And so Scrum team has appeared, which is okay, but I may want to know, well, actually, who's in there? Have we got everyone we need to? So just a little tip over here on the membership. You can see it says direct right now. If I click expanded, it gives me then all the people that are inside that group. So you want to see actually resolve to make sure you've got everyone you think. So then what security have they now got? So you know the traditional model in Team Foundation Server, we have project administrators, contributors, readers. We can have a look at how they're secured through here. So I'm going to go to my team project level and security. So you can see I've got this new notion, right? This teams element here. I've got my traditional groups there, contributors, administrators, and readers. So project administrators, do everything, and still the only people who can change iterations. Contributors, generally that's everybody on my project team, right? Can do a limited amount of rights. Readers are often my stakeholders. I just want them to have some kind of read-only view of what we're up to. And build administrators who aren't necessarily part of my team, but can do things like set up build definitions, start and stop builds. And so we've also got out here our team. So I'll go into member of here, and you can see the default, it will add them to contributors. So when it creates the team, it's going to add them straight into contributors. If that's not enough, if you like to run with everyone as project admins, then you can come in and change it here. Also, if I go in and try and create a new team, it'll ask me what group to put them in. So when I create a new team, give them a name and description. If I choose to, if you have a custom group, you can put them in here. So the default is contained in the process template. If you want all of your teams to automatically go into admins, you're going to have to make a change to the process template to do that. So I'm going to move across to areas. And remember, areas are our functional split of our product. So different ways that we can slice up our backlog to look at different functional areas of interest, if you like. So I'm going to create a couple of areas here. Let's say we might have the administration functions. And I'll create one more here, which might be, I don't know, user management. And we can go as nested as we need to. So this is similar to Team Foundation Server 2010, but it enables me to get a bit more granular about where my teams are focused. Right? So you can see it says up here default area, and it's telling me sub areas are included. This is saying my team is set to this level. And I can change this, come down here and say, set this area as the default area for my team. So this is how I scale. If I want one team that's only looking at the administration features on the backlog, I set that area to be their default. And I can choose whether they see things underneath there or not. So this is, I can run multiple teams now against a single backlog, and depending what area that product backlog item is assigned to, is whose view it's going to show up across the teams. Yeah? Okay. So our product backlog. We're all used to that grid view. Those of you that are using 2010, we get the grid and we add into the grid, and it's not the nicest format to work with. So we want to talk about whether you call them desirements, requirements. People who are using this sort of acceptance, test-driven development approach kind of moved into, well, product backlog's more a desirement because we can't validate it yet. We haven't got a test for it. Then it becomes a requirement. And these are the kind of things we want to store against our product backlog. Some notion of value that the product owner, or hopefully someone with a commercial interest, is going to fill in for us. So how important is this? What return on investment is it going to provide? Something that describes effort or cost. And lots of teams do t-shirt sizes, story points, planning poker, small, medium, large, whatever works for you. But we get these two axes. We get a value and a cost, and we can use those when we start to think about ordering them for delivery. And that order reflects in that priority field, right? So how are they sequenced? anyone can add to the product backlog, right? So the tooling has some security groups, but from a Scrum point of view, anyone can add anything they like to the product backlog. Product owner might decide it's flat last and it's about number 8,040, so you're never going to do it, but hey, we can all add to it, right? So we're going to put our suggestions on there. And then it might contain different types of work, so bugs, traditional feature requests. It might have epics, so I want something, for now I just want something really big. We'll chop it up later when we get to it, but for now let's just put something huge as a sort of a big, almost a statement of intent, right? Something we'd like to do if we find that we have the capacity. So what does that look like? Let's add some product backlog items, and we'll add some iterations to our sprint. So just before we finish up with security, this is what our base level iterations look like. We've got release 1 through 6, release 2, 1 through 6. This is our start point out of the box, and we can obviously change this. We can start the sprint set dates. So remember, 2010 makes us set dates on these sprint work items. Remember I said that's gone? This is now where we set this metadata on the sprint. So let's put some dates in here. Let's say sprint 1 finished, what are we today? The 5th? Sprint 1 finished on the 3rd. And which means it went to, started on the 28th. Is that 2 weeks? Yes? No? Silence? I'll take that as a yes. So sprint 2 is right now, and we started that on the 4th. So the day after sprint 1 finished, and that was going to finish on the 17th. 1 week. Thank you. Actually, it doesn't matter. We'll leave it as 1 week for now. And so we'll start on the 18th, and we'll finish on the 1st. And maybe we'll put one more in, which starts on the 2nd. It'd be really nice if you could just go 2 weeks, go, right? And just, but no, not there yet. I'm going to blog something that does that, I think. Okay, so we started on the 2nd, so we're going to be finished on the 15th. That'll do. Okay. Finished on the 3rd, so it started on the 21st. Is that right? There we go. Now you see these tick boxes. These tick boxes are saying, do you want to see these? It's not, are they really there, just do you want to see them? So we want to limit the noise, right? We only want to see what we're doing right now, maybe what we just did, and a little bit ahead. And so we use these tick boxes to drive that. So I'm going to say I don't want to see 5 and 6. So I just turn those off. Okay, so I think we're ready to go. We've got a team, we've got team members, we've given them the security rights they need, we've set up our iterations, our sprints, and we've set up our areas. Okay? So we'll flick back through to the home page here, and we'll go to this view backlog. And so this is called a quick add panel, this bit at the top in grey. And this is a way for us to quickly add in the product backlog items. We might be in a workshop coming up with these, and we want a quick way to do it without adding a whole dialogue with a bunch of required fields. And so this is what this is for. So if I add in, let's say I want to a feature that has an export to PDF. Right? We need to be able to do that with our reports. And I hit add. And you see that's grey right now. That's doing a background save. So I can go through and keep typing here and say, well, I also want a reporting dashboard. And I want to, let's say, a way to upload CSV files. The point here is I can keep going, and this tool is going to keep up with me. Right? Because it's doing this background save, it's not, file, new, boom, and I've got to fill in all these fields, and that can be quite an annoying way to work. So it's great for workshops. The other thing is that quick add panel is customizable. So if you want business value or effort to be a field you put in for every single one, drop it on that. So it's a very quick process template customization, and then you can make sure as you whack them in, that extra field is on there as well. So that's pretty good. So we've got some basic work in here now.
Is that configurable by type?
By type?
So backlog items require this extra field, but a bug doesn't.
Well, you could, but remember under the hood, a bug is really a backlog item with some extra bits. So from a Scrum point of view, a bug is really just a backlog item, right? It's unfinished work. It's work that needs to be done. The tooling takes that a little bit further and says, well, there's interesting things about a bug that we want to differentiate. What build was it found in? What are the steps to reproduce? What test cases it was exhibited in? And so that's why TFS calls them out as two different work item types. But you'll notice if we create a new bug here, let's do a terrible bug. And I open up my export to PDF function. And let's see what we've got here. You can see we've got business value and effort. So this is our idea of story points or time estimation if that's what you're using, relative estimation if that's what you're using, and a business value. And then I load up my bug. And it too has effort. Right, again, the same way to do the estimation. So underlying, this will also follow the same states as a product backlog item. So approved is the next state, then it'll go to committed. So it's a very long way of saying, yes, you could, but be aware that they do share an awful lot as types. Okay, so let's put our bug, notice this, we're now doing prioritization. I'm going to put our bug down at the bottom. So drag and drop prioritization. We don't have to care about priority fields. So kind of as you'd expect, right? If my product owner wants to interact with this, they don't even want to have to open them. Well, I want this down here. And we can just drag and drop until we're happy with the priorities. So again, huge kind of advance from what we've got today in 2010. So we've got our sprints in. The last thing I want to show you here is one of the pain points in 2010, and it's just really to be aware of it. Actually, I'll show you on here first. Go to our product backlog, and you can see over here on the left, it knows about the dates we put in for our sprint. Right? It knows sprint 1 is finished, sprint 2 is current, and the others are ahead because of those date ranges we put in. So that's good. We've got some context. When I go into this work items view, though, and into queries, current sprint backlog, this has lost that awareness. So just like today, this doesn't know what the current sprint is, doesn't know what today is. So if I go and edit this, you can see it's looking for anything in this one is looking for anything in our requirement category that's underneath our whole project. So it's not aware that sprint 1 is now the current sprint. If I did the same thing in Visual Studio, go ahead and look at our work items, sprint backlog, and I edit in here. We're looking in sprint 1. Remember, sprint 1 is finished. We've already finished sprint 1. Sprint 2 is our current sprint. And so this is still a manual process you've got to do. If we get time at the end, I'll show you a trick. That means you don't have to do this for every single sprint rollover. It's kind of annoying that this didn't get fixed up in this release, but there you go. It's another one of those housekeeping tasks that is about closing off a sprint and moving to the next one, is updating what the current sprint is on the query. So I'd recommend if you do it this way, don't use this trick I'll show you at the end, you rename that query to be sprint 1 backlog, sprint 2 backlog, and then everyone understands what they're looking at. Otherwise, people assume that current sprint is going to magically find the things that are there, right? Okay, so I'm going to save that. Now I've changed it to be sprint 2. Come back. Okay, so back to my backlog. I've got these things in here, and now maybe that bug is important. Let's just drag this back up. How do I know that's a bug? You don't get a book for that. Sorry? It's reproducible, but just from looking at this list, how do I know which are bugs and which are feature requests? I don't, right? So again, it's fitting to that. It's kind of what I was saying before. It really treats them, as far as the tooling can, as the same. So there's no way for me to differentiate at this level what the difference between a bug and a feature request. You may want to. You're not going to see it in this view. So what about different levels? Let's add an epic. So, sorry? Yep. Absolutely. Let's do another bad bug. Yep, it's the same. So I used that type when I created this first one. Yeah, no, so it's telling you what you're going to add. Yeah. Sorry? Yep, so I could change my process template to display that column, but there's nothing in here. So there's no sort of right-click display these fields. It's a process template. In terms of this view, it's a process template customization. So let's put an epic in. You know, we talked before about wanting to work at different levels on our product backlog. So something that we're going to need to break down at some point. So let's have maybe solve world peace is pretty good, right? We can use Scrum to solve world peace. That's pretty big. And you see where that put it? It put it below the line I had highlighted. So you've got some options here. If I highlight the top and I add things in, it'll add them at the top. If I highlight somewhere else, it'll add them in where I've got the line highlighted. So it's not just always at the top, if that's behavior that you're trying to drive. So last thing I'll show you from here is in our work items. We can add this concept of team favorites. Team favorites are things that show up on the home screen as tiles, and they're good notifiers of important behaviors we want the team to be aware of. So let's say, for example, we want the whole team to have quick notification of any impediments. This is the open impediments query. I can drop this option down here and choose add to team favorites. So now when I go to my home screen, you see I've got this new tile showed up, which is team favorites. And I can add queries, builds, a whole bunch of stuff in here. And it's this dashboard idea of what does my team care about? Maybe I want to add work in progress. You know, I want a Kanban style whip limit implementation. You know, we should only be working on 4 things at once. So we'll add that query of work in progress on here. And that means when I come to the home page, maybe there's a few things in here, I can just click on the tile and it's going to take me to the results of the query. So just handy things your team can customize for themselves to work out what's important for them. Okay. We'll do for that. So we've got our base product backlog in. We've put some items in. We've got some big, some small, some bugs. And then we're ready for our team to sort of come together and take a look at that. You know, maybe the product owners just put those in on their own, or the BA, or whoever it is in your organization that does that. Now we want to get into this grooming process. Right, I spend a lot of time going into companies and helping them with Scrum. And the single biggest thing that teams aren't doing is this. Because it's not called out as a special meeting in Scrum, it's forgotten. Like, you'll find it in that Scrum guide, but most teams I find aren't doing it. And they're the same teams that are saying, you know, we keep changing stuff in the middle of a sprint because we don't really know much about it when we start. And so we then don't finish at the end of the sprint. And this pattern isn't seeming to go away. How do other teams manage it? And this is normally because this isn't happening. So 10%, right? We're saying grooming should take up to 10%. I'll get rid of the up to and say 10%. 4 hours of every person for every day. That's a lot of time looking forwards, 1 sprint, maybe 2, but at least 1, what's coming. Let's get the detail fleshed out, understand all the acceptance criteria. You know, if UML is your thing or use cases are your thing, whatever you use to decompose it, find out all the detail. So that by the time you take this into sprint planning, everyone knows how they're going to build it. Right? There is no, we'll need a 4-day research task on this one. That then sort of kills you in terms of your delivery. So grooming might be 1 hour a week, sorry, 1 meeting a week, what we do for half a day, or it could be 1 hour a day if that works for our product owner. You know, whatever works for your organization, but you've got to have it. You've got to have it, otherwise you're going to hit those typical problems of scope shifting in the middle of the sprint, and we can never finish stuff. So what does that mean for our tooling? So we'll go ahead and look at our backlog. And so we're going to make some commitments now. We're going to commit some of these features into our sprint. So we've talked about some of these fields. I'm going to move the state to be approved. This is my product owner saying, yes, we're going to take this on and do it. So we've moved it to approved. You can see here I've got the user story syntax by default. That's going. It's already gone in the cloud version, right? Because user stories are only one way to do it. You can use work item templates if you want to get it back, but it's going. So we've moved it to approved, and maybe we put in some value and some effort. So let's say we've done a story points, and we think that's about an 8 points. And let's do the same for this one. Approved. That's about 8 points too. Whoops, I don't want to assign it to anyone. 3 points. And the one I'm interested in also is this world piece, because that's interesting. What do you reckon? 100? It's as big as we got, right? Okay, so those are the ones we've got. So we've gone through grooming, and maybe this means also we're going to pull some of these. Yeah, there we go. So it's in the order we want. We've added some acceptance criteria, and the team are ready now to take some of this into our sprint. So I'll just add some effort on this last one that I missed. Put it into business value. Great. How much do we take in? Well, we want to work from our velocity. We can use that with this forecast here. So I turn forecasting on. It said based on a velocity of 10, this is how much you're going to finish in each sprint. Again, this isn't, okay, yes, sir, I'll take that on. It's a guide, right? It's one piece of information that our teams can use. And so we can say, well, actually, our traditional value is 8. What does that look like in terms of what we can take on? And so it's going to give you a way also to have a conversation with your stakeholders who say, when am I going to get my feature? You can say, well, with the current ordered backlog and our current rate, it's going to be in sprint 5. That's 10 weeks away. That's when you're going to get it. So you can have a more numerical-based conversation about when you're likely to ship their feature, which can be useful from a release planning point of view. Okay, so we've decided we're going to go ahead and do these two. So let's take these 2 items into our sprint. So we're going to do sprint 2. So I'm just dragging this across to sprint 2, and you'll see it's updated the iteration path for me. So that's handy. And I'll drag that one in there too. So we've now got both of those in our sprint ready to go. We need to change the status again to be committed. We've committed these items to our sprint. And rather than open up each one and do committed, I'm going to go to work items here and look at our sprint backlog. And I can click on both of these and do this little bulk edit selected work items. I want to change the state to be committed. So that's a handy feature that was in 2010 web access that's been ported to 2012. So just quick ways to get that sorted for us. So we've committed those to the sprint, and the view we really want to move to now is our sprint backlog, right? So we know what we're going to build. We've used forecasting to help us decide that. We want to have a look at our sprint backlog. This is what we've got. So we're pretty much now ready to start breaking things down. So we want to achieve our sprint goal. Let's quickly add some tasks in here. And actually, let's add our world piece. Right, if we go back to our backlog view, say, well, let's break world piece down a bit. So here it is. Maybe we want to add a child product backlog item. So I can add up here a new linked work item, it'll be a child, and product backlog item. So what might be one of the things we've got to do? Maybe implement a Middle Eastern peace plan. Getting a bit political now, but never mind. Man, trying to think this stuff up on the fly. But, you know, we've got to sort Middle East out, and then we'll do Asia, and we'll do all the other countries. Okay, and that's maybe a 40. If world peace is 100, maybe that's a 40. Great, so save all that. Now looking at my backlog, if I refresh this view, you can see I get a nested view here. So I've got solve world peace. This 100 is kind of grayed out because I'm not actually going to do this anymore. What I'm going to do is these things here. But we're maintaining the link, and that's important. So if we go through and say, yep, we're going to approve that, our product owner's happy. And maybe we want to do this in the current sprint. So I'll drag this over to sprint 2. Notice I haven't dragged world peace. Right, and if I try, you see it won't let me drop it there. This is not what we're building now. What we're building is this. And we're just using this relationship to show how far through world peace we're going to get. Okay, so let's go to sprint 2. Let's add some tasks real quick. So what do we got here? Middle East peace plan. We need to get the UN sign off, I would guess. Right, United Nations to be happy. And that's going to take an hour. They're pretty efficient, those guys. Reporting dashboard, 2 hours. We'll say we want to build it. Yeah. And build PDF. 5 hours. It's longer to build a PDF than world peace. Great. So we've got one thing we didn't do with our bulk edit. We didn't commit to that one because I added it afterwards. So let's update that. Everything looks good. Now this is kind of the view we were used to in 2010, right? This nested view. Not that nice, but it's okay for planning. So you'll look over here on the right-hand side. It's giving me some team metrics. You haven't seen this activity, and it's so bad from a Scrum point of view, I'm not even going to explain what it does. So nothing to see here, nothing to see here, and nothing to see here either. Let's focus all about the team. You can see I've got 8 hours worth of work, which is the total of all these tasks I've added. Now I'm going to go into this capacity view. This is my team. This is going to help me with planning as well. Julia's the only one who ever does any work, and she works 1 hour a day. Right, the rest of them, lazy. What this is showing me over here is I've now got 8 hours of work with a team that's got a capacity of 9 hours. Right, so there's 9 days left in the sprint. Julia works an hour a day, so it's 9 hours. And I've got 8 hours of tasks. If I go back here and add another task, this one, bad task, and that's an extra 2 hours. You see that's gone red. So now we've got some problems with our allocation. Again, it's not a question of follow what the tool says, but another helpful piece of input. Really, are we sure? And in capacity, I can add team days off, training days, and all that stuff. So our sprint's ready to go. We've got features locked in, we've decomposed the tasks, we're pretty much ready to go. You'll also notice up here on the right-hand side, our backlog is now, our burn down chart's now running because we've put tasks in, so we've got time. So this instant view is great, right? We can see where it's at. Here are our sprint days, how many days we've got left. So we need to actually finish our sprint. Hopefully it's potentially releasable, all those good things. All our states are in place, our branch is done if we're branched for the sprint. We've done our retrospective and we're ready for the next one. So whatever it takes to actually deliver this stuff. Let's have a look how we do that. So now we're going to move to a board view, right? This is what we're used to seeing in lots of other agile tools. It's giving me 2 roll-ups of numbers. I've got a to-do total, so all the tasks in the to-do state, as well as a roll-up by each feature. So there's 7 hours to do this feature in total, so on and so on. And I can pivot that across team members. So right now they're all unassigned, but if I had Julia who was doing something, I'd see her as a line in here. So I can see, task hog guy. There's always one, right? Who turns in at day 1 of the sprint and says, I'll do these 10, see you in 2 weeks. And you never see him until he comes at the end and says, I didn't finish any. And so you can just watch for task hog guy and say, I don't think so. So let's go back to backlog items, and we want to start moving. So we move stuff across to in progress, and our burn down updates automatically. and our columns here update automatically. When I want to update work remaining, I can just one click from here and update it, so I don't even have to open it, which is nice. Drag across to done because I'm finished. And oops, didn't include testing, better put it back. Now you're going to give me the error because, and there's a book in it for you. What's that? Right, I think you got it. Yep, you need to update the time. I'll leave it up here. Come get it at the end. Because the work remaining is 0, right? So how can we have something that's in progress with no work remaining? So if we go in here and say, yep, now it's happy. So we go through and we can clear our items. One thing to note here, I've done all the tasks on this particular feature, and if I go and open this, this still isn't done. So it's not going to, by finishing all the tasks, it's not going to automatically update that to done. That was a deliberate decision on the part of the team because lots of Scrum teams want the product owner to eyeball it and go, okay, now I'm happy. You know, they want some kind of extra step, and so that's why you've now got to go and do this manually. Yep, you could change that in your process template if you want.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
The columns, can you actually add more columns in there? Is it going to require you to change the template?
Yeah, you can change the process template if you want more columns. Yep. And if you're not sure about how long things are going to take, then you can use this tool that another MVP in the States put together, which I think you'll like. It's called the Scrum Psychic. So if someone's asking you for hours, you can get, okay. Is that, we're moving to story points, no problem. And, you know, sprint goals, yeah, I can help you with that. Say that. Don't tell scrum.org. Okay, so as we go, we've got our burn down. And you'll grey out, I'm not sure. Oh, you can see it. You see the greyed out for the weekends. So just showing you you've got some weekends. And again, this is automatically updating as we go. So one last thing I want to call out, because again, I see lots and lots of teams don't have it, is definition of done, kind of really key, right? Doesn't work without this, and so please do have one. You will see, the other reason I wanted to call it out, there's no obvious place to put it in here. Lots of teams use a wiki on SharePoint, or they create some kind of work item placeholder, or they put it in the notes. There's no first-class place for it in here, which I think is a real shame. So even if it's on a piece of paper on the wall, find a place for it. And there is one kind of add-in that you might find. It hasn't been ported to 2012 yet, but it's like a little checklist that shows up in your product backlog item. You can say, based on a list you give it, yes, this is done, this is done, this is done. So whatever kind of checklist-based format you can use, it's a great way to make sure we do this, put every feature through the same rigor, basically, right? Okay, I think that's me, right on time. A couple of things to call out before I take any questions. This is a course from scrum.org if you're interested in more of this type of stuff. The cloud version is already further ahead than the on-premise version. So the cloud version of this, the web access, so the Team Foundation service running on Azure, it's already got a Kanban board, if you're into Kanban. So Kanban is coming to on-premise, and it's coming soon, right? They're not going to wait 2 years. They're doing these out-of-band releases. But the cloud instance, and it's free, is a great way to see what's coming. So I encourage you to go into Anthony Borton's session to see what's there and ask him about the Kanban board if he doesn't show it to you. I'll hang around for questions, or my contact details are on there. So my last question is, how much time should you spend grooming? Oh, that was too close.